You know, in life, sometimes when you're looking for something and you end up not finding that thing, but you find other little treasures that you weren't expecting, maybe you've forgotten about, maybe you shouldn't have forgotten about. A few years ago, I did an interview with the lead singers, the two main guys in Firefall, Larry Burnett and the guy who sang most of the hits, Rick Roberts. Couldn't find them anywhere. I wanted to represent them on YouTube and Facebook. Plus, I had an interview with Kathy Valentine, the bassist of the Go-Go's. Nowhere to be seen. I couldn't find it. So I'm going through hard drives. And what did I find? An interview that I completely forgot about. And Dave, I'm so sorry, but let me tell you something about this guy. I got into radio, major market. I wasn't ready to be there in 1983 at 96 K Light in Edmonton. Immediately upon joining that staff, one guy stood out more than anybody else. Len Tucson, yes, the main boss. He was a legend in Edmonton. But secondary was Dave Welch. Dave was one of those guys. The second I heard him on the radio, I'd heard these guys before I got into radio, but getting to know Dave was kind of cool. He was a devil-may-care kind of guy, didn't suffer fools. But just watching him work made a big difference in my life. He had this great show with his cohort, Larry Musser, called The Inside Track. It was so funny. It was everything I wanted to do in radio. I thought if I could get to that level someday, and I knew I was far away from it then, maybe I'll have a good career. One of the things I wanted to do with this channel is basically interview some of my radio heroes. And it's nice when I've had a chance to work with them. I worked with Dave, as mentioned, at 96 K Light in Edmonton. He moved to 14 C-Fun, the legendary station in Vancouver. And a few years later, I was hired there. But Dave was a musician, he was a funny guy on and off the air, and he had a presence which I really liked. But watching him enunciate, watching him navigating comedy taught me an awful lot. And it's an honor for me to present to you this interview. It's a few years old already. I thought I'd lost it. With the great Dave Welch on Rock History Canada. Enjoy. By the way, how did you get the bug? I mean, everyone has a story, and like everybody has a story of going, no, I got to do that. I got to do that. Some people say the Beatles. Other people say it was that guy at the local radio station. What was it for you to decide to get into radio?
Well, I grew up in Toronto, and I listened to Chum and CFTR as a kid, and that sounded like a good job. And so when it was time to, when you're in the end of high school and it's time to choose where you want to go, I chose Ryerson for radio TV. And I also chose Humber College because they had a radio broadcasting course. And I remember going to the interview at Humber and them asking me, well, if you also had a chance to go to Ryerson instead, would you choose that? And I think I probably closed the deal by saying, well, actually they have television. So yeah, I'd probably like that. And you could see them, folding my application up. But so I did get accepted to Ryerson for radio television, and I went there for 3 years. And then after
what was your first impression? What was your first? Sorry to interrupt you. What was your first impression? You're going there. I mean, were you nervous? Were you excited? All of the above? What?
Yeah, all of the above. And the way they had the course structured, and it's totally different now, but the way they had the course structured at Ryerson then was in the first year you took radio. In the second year, you most people didn't advance beyond the first year of radio. They didn't take an advanced radio course in second year. Most people went just for the TV. So yes, I did take TV in second and third year. So I kind of finished by, basically majoring more in TV than radio. But I still did work at the campus station on air once in a while. And when I was in second year, I got a job, part-time job at a station called CJRT FM, which is the precursor to Jazz FM 91 in Toronto. Oh, wow. But CJRT at the time was classical and jazz and some spoken word. And I worked in the music library. So I got to catalog all the classical records. I learned a lot about jazz because I took care of, filing all the jazz records. And I would listen to music while I was working and typing up little filing cards and stuff like that. And I also programmed a little classical music show. They had this little half-hour show at 6:30 every night, or 6 o'clock, called Intermezzo. And I would program that. That was part of my job. So I got to learn a little bit of this and that. And that was a fun job. Plus, I got lots of free records. I got lots of free 45s that came in because they didn't play rock or pop music. So they'd say, take what you want. So I have a good collection of mid to late 70s 45s, thanks to them.
What were your parents' impression when you went in that direction? Did your parents were your parents around? What was their impression?
Oh yeah, they just encouraged me. They never tried to put any pressure on me where I should go, where should I direct myself. They thought, okay, it's an interesting job, and best of luck to you. And that's the way it was. And so it was great. And then after I graduated, I worked at Ryerson for a year as a teaching assistant because I still hadn't decided exactly what I wanted to do. I really enjoyed the TV aspect. I directed quite a few shows. I did some community cable where I directed some shows, and in Mississauga, I think it was. And then, so I used it as a spacer, like, oh my gosh, I don't know really what I want to do, but here's this job. They always hire some recent grads to be a teaching assistant. And I chose the radio one instead of the TV. And I got to, meet all these first years and help them out with their projects and stuff. And there's another aspect of that was pretty interesting. Just as I was finishing third year, I knew I was going to be working there in September, but I didn't have a sort of a summer job. And a fellow who was in one of my classes, his name was John Shannon. He became this well-known TV hockey executive. I think he's still on the air somewhere on Sportsnet. I think he has been. He used to work part-time in the newsroom at CFRB in Toronto. And he said to me, oh, I'm going to be leaving my job. And are you interested in a part-time job? I said, yeah, I'm looking for a summer job. He says, well, give this guy a call. I give him a call. And I got hired on to work in the newsroom of CFRB Toronto, which was, I worked for Standard Broadcast News, but we were adjacent to the CFRB newsroom, which was just full of these legendary guys, right? And these are people that I grew up listening to because my mom and dad always had CFRB on the kitchen table radio, right? And so I got to work there, and I worked there all summer long. It was a tough job, actually. And they actually phoned me. They were going to let go somebody. And they phoned me, and I think it was the first week or second week of September. And they phoned me while I was at work at Ryerson. They said, oh, we have this opening because we're going to get rid of so-and-so. Do you want the job? And I said, I've sort of committed to being here as a teaching assistant. And I don't know, quite honestly, I don't know if I wanted that job as a full-time job.
Yeah.
But it was great as a part-time job. I said, keep me on as part-time. I'll work weekends or whatever. And so that's the way it was. And I think I worked there off and on, probably till about 2 weeks before I moved out to Edmonton. So it was quite fascinating. It was interesting. And I got to go on the air a few times. Once in a while, a newscaster would say, why don't you do this story on such and such? I'll put it on the 11 o'clock newscast at night. So it was fun.
When from being an Ontario boy, we both moved to Edmonton in '79. You moved for radio. I just moved because I wanted to move.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What was your impression of Edmonton? Because it was a boom town then. It was doing really well in '79.
It was a boom town, and I got there, and there were a lot of folks from Ontario there. So I mean, there were people from Ontario at the radio station. So I didn't take long to to make friends and. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I lived out in the south end of town, not too far from the radio station, and I had a friend who lived in the Millwoods area. But no, Edmonton was a great town. I think it's funny when I went beyond Edmonton, when I went to Vancouver, and I had talked to people there, and they said, "Oh, how did you live in Edmonton for that long? Isn't it? What's to do there?" And I became quite a defender of Edmonton, actually, quite an ambassador for it, because I had 7 really good years there. And I found that there's way more to Edmonton than the mall, because they were building the West Edmonton Mall during my time there. And there was more than just the Edmonton Oilers and the Edmonton Eskimos. And the Oilers, they started in the NHL the year we started at the radio station. And so there was a lot more to it. And they had a really good theater program in the university, really good arts scene. And I got involved a little bit with theater and music outside.
A lot of festivals, a ton of festivals.
Yeah, the folk festival was great. The Fringe Festival, the Theater Festival is second to none. And, yeah, so a lot to do there, and it was a great town. And then so I took advantage of just about everything Edmonton had to offer, and it was quite a creative time. So,
Did you keep your interviews from K-Light? Do you still have them? The interviews you did?
you mean the artist interviews?
Yeah, the artist interviews.
Yeah, yeah, I have a lot of those on reel to reel tape on that machine there. You and I have probably a few on cassette. There's a lot of great artists I remember meeting or talking to on the phone, and I mean, one of those early artists was Christopher Cross. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
He was a huge success right off the bat, but I went to interview him in a hotel in in Edmonton because he was opening for Fleetwood Mac.
That's right. Yeah.
But that was one of my favorite interviews, one of my earlier ones, but certainly one of my favorite ones because he was just such a down to earth guy, and I always remember the things he said about his music and what he was aiming to do with his first album, and it was good. But I'm sure somewhere on a cassette I still have that, and other artists on the phone, like may they rest in peace, you know, like John Prine and
Wow.
Steve Goodman and you know, Ian Thomas, great Canadian artist like Ian
You
Thomas.
interviewed Steve Goodman back then? Because I didn't know who Steve Goodman was. Probably, you know, someone sent me this ago. He says, here's a little man with a lot of talent, because he wasn't a big man. And he sent me, and I'm going, I've been in radio how many years? But by then it'd been 30 years, and I had no idea who Steve Goodman was.
Oh, Steve Goodman, yeah.
Yeah.
He was best known for writing that song, City of New Orleans, about the train, right?
Yeah.
Arlo Guthrie had the hit.
Yeah.
But I think he might have been opening for John Prine. So I think I did it like maybe the same week as John Prine.
Makes sense.
Good interview. And the John Prine interview went really well, but it's the best interview I never recorded because
oh no,
I had the tape set up in the booth to interview John Prine. I was waiting for his phone call, and someone from the newsroom came in and said, I need this tape machine. I got to record something real quick. Do you mind? I said, okay. I took the tape off, and then she went and did her interview or whatever she had to do, and then put the thing back on the machine. And next thing you know, the call's coming in to record Prine, and I start the machine. Well, as it turned out, the tape had been twisted over the head, so I never got any of it.
Oh my God.
It was a great conference. Well, John Prine is a tremendous artist.
Yeah.
And I didn't know a whole lot about him at the time, but
yeah. When you left, was it a hard decision for you to go to Vancouver, or were you just jumping for joy? I mean, how did it feel?
No, I you know, it's one of those things where I'm sort of I do things in a 5 to 7 year cycle, it seems. And by 86, I had actually gotten a couple of unsolicited offers from another city. It wasn't Vancouver. And I knew that it was probably time to move on. And I didn't take those other opportunities, and that's fine. But I saw an opportunity they advertised for, you know, there used to be that Broadcaster magazine.
Yeah.
And they ran an ad in it. And it was probably September or August of 86. And I just said, what the heck? I've been getting all these other offers or, you know, bites from other places that I don't necessarily want to go to. I'll try this. Because then I always wanted to work for Chum, and they owned C-Fun. I thought, well, that's a good thing. And yeah, I sent my tape, and I got a call from Stu Ferguson, who was kind of the assistant program director. And we hit it off really well on the phone. And then I talked to Neil Gallagher, who was the program director eventually. And they made me an offer to come to Vancouver. So I think that was in November as well, November of 86. One of the worst drives I ever had in my life.
Why? What, did it snow?
Well, I left Edmonton on a Saturday afternoon. I'm going to guess it was probably around November the 12th or something like that. Yeah. Maybe the 10th. And I left town a little too late in the day. It was probably after 3:00, and it started snowing, and it started snowing pretty bad. And I was, you know, and I had this little Toyota Celica, a great car in the summertime. I had performance tires on it, but I didn't have snow tires. And I was on that Yellowhead Highway, and I was following taillights because I didn't want to go off the road. And And finally, I think by Hinton, if you know where Hinton is, just before Jasper, I think it just was mostly wet snow or rain, and I stayed there. And then the next day, I went through on the Yellowhead route again into BC, and it was a beautiful day, but the roads were terrible. And I actually did one of those 360 kind of spins, right? Fortunately, nobody was coming the other way
How
at
dare
that
you
moment.
leave Edmonton? How dare you? Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm going, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do this. And then it started snowing really bad near Kamloops. And then I had to get on that Coquihalla Highway. And that was fairly new at the time because it was only 86. And I get on the thing and I couldn't barely get up the hill in Kamloops to get up onto this highway. And then they stop you at the what's that toll booth or whatever.
Oh, it was a toll booth. That's right. That's right.
Near Merritt, I think, or something.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to charge you. And I looked at them. I said, you should be paying me to go on this thing. This has been a hellish drive. And then a more hellish drive to get. And then finally, when you went down to Hope, it started to rain instead of snow. So but that was my first impression of BC in terms of what this was going to be like. And I got to Vancouver and checked in, I think on the 13th of November, and did an overnight dry run kind of thing on an overnight show. And the rest I did, I think, a swing shift, right? So I was kind of on, I think, weekend afternoons, and then 3 days a week or 2 days a week, I think, doing a late afternoon drive. It was like from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. or something like that.
Well, how do you describe your time in Vancouver? I mean, this was a bunch of really good people that were at that radio station.
Oh yeah, we had Fred Latrimo, like I said, and Tom Lucas was a radio veteran, and a lot of people and then we had some younger guys who were just swinging answers and stuff. And Stu Ferguson was there, of course, and we became really good friends.
Funny man.
Was
funny man.
Yes. When you get him going, he's very funny. He has a serious side, but Stu, he's got a great sense of humor. Yeah, that's why we click so well. But CFUN was interesting because it was kind of going through. Well, it was an AM station, so that was a little different for me. See, I didn't have the AM background at all. My first gig was on FM, and I always thought FM, to me, when I grew up, FM was really kind of laid back and stuff. So I had to, well, and this is what I'm saying about K-Lite and CKRA working there was like 2 or 3 different formats. By the time I got out of there and I was doing more of an up-tempo delivery with the light rock, less talk kind of thing, that put me in good stead for what CFUN was doing, which was light rock, less talk, And so my style had kind of, punched it up a little bit. And that's why it was ready for that, because I didn't have much AM background. I had no AM background at all. So to me, talking to the audience was being kind of laid back, right? But then you have to, after a while, you have to realize it's commercial radio. You gotta pump it up a little bit. And I did that in the latter days of K-Lite, and then that was good for CFUN.
So they say radio announcers are frustrated musicians, but some people can play. When did you become, like, at what point did you start playing?
Oh, I played the piano since I was about 5. Yeah. My parents thought I was keenly interested in piano, and I showed an interest. And so they bought me a piano. I took lessons from a really good teacher in our neighborhood at the time, and probably did that for till I was, I was on Tiny Talent Time as well. That was my TV debut on Channel 11, CHCH in Hamilton.
What did you play? Do you remember?
The Scandinavian dance song, I think it was called, and maybe one other thing. I'm not too sure. But 1962, yeah, it was a famous show. People watched it like you wouldn't believe. It was this little black and white TV show, and they videotaped it, but they didn't save the tapes. I think they burned them or they recycled them or something. But I was on that, and that was when I was, I guess, 7 years old or something like that. But I played piano. I took lessons till I was in grade 9 at high school. I was still taking lessons, and so, but I found high school too busy, so I had to drop it. And that's when I started playing more by ear as opposed to, the classical kind of stuff I was up in my upbringing was. And it's nice when you can develop an ear and musicianship. Sometimes you have to, it's nice to have the formal training, but it's nice to be able to figure stuff out on your own sometimes, right? So
when you left, when you left Vancouver, I mean, for me personally, it was a hard decision to leave Vancouver, and I hear that from a lot of other broadcasters when they leave. What happened there?
Well, actually, before that, I mean, 5 years after I started CFUN, I got an offer to go to, and like I told you, you get this confidence doing the morning show, and you're filling in so much because Fred had he had a generous vacation plan, let's say that. So I got to fill in.
Right? Sea Isle?
What's that?
Did you go to Sea Isle?
I went to Sea Isle. I was offered a chance to go to Sea Isle. It was owned by one individual, and it wasn't a chain or anything. And so I went there, and I was hired by, BJ Doyle was the program director at the time. And he just thought it would be a good mix for me to go over there.
He's from Kayla. Right? He was from Kayla. I think BJ.
Yeah, he worked at Kayla.
Kayla, you replaced me.
I think he replaced you, actually.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yeah, he replaced me. Yeah.
And so I said, sure, this is a good opportunity, and I went there, and things changed, and we started off great. We had a great time, and we were playing 50s and 60s and 70s there. And I'm sorry I don't have a souvenir from there to show you. By the way, I think I should show you this. This is the K-Light Cup.
Ah.
I showed you the original. What does that say? Light Rock and More? Before they went Light Rock, Let's Talk, it was Light Rock and More. More what? I didn't know, but that could have included the inside track.
Yes.
So Sea Isle, it started off great. And then they had this big budget cutting day. So I had started developing quite a rapport with the newsman and with the traffic reporter. So, you want to build a team. I didn't have a producer. Previous person did, I think. I didn't have one. And so I got in there, and I'm playing all kinds of different configurations of music, CDs, DAT. Remember DAT tapes?
Yeah.
And I think
that's a machine right there.
And I think even some reel-to-reel stuff. It was a whole bunch. It was stuff on hard drive. It was like 4 or 5 different things. And I had, you're scrambling on your own to do this, and then you're developing this rapport with the people you're working. It was a lot of fun. And then by August and this was 92. So I started in May of 92. So in August of 92, they had a Black Friday, and they let go, I think, about 12 people, office, on air, part-time, full-time. But the thing that was the most damaging was they let go of the newsman from my show. So a little bit of the team fell apart there.
You feel comfortable? What was his name? Do you want to leave it out, or do you want to?
Oh yeah, it was John Norman, and he had been at Sea Isle a long time, and we were getting along like a house on fire, and it was great. And that was sad because but that's the kind of thing that can happen in radio, right? And from that point on, it got a little more tenuous, and we did the best we can. And then BJ Doyle, the program director, he got let go. I think it was in probably February of 93 or March of 93. And so things started to, they had a new general manager who I think it was what you'd call him the axe man, because he kind of, he saw things happening a certain way, and everybody's got their own stamp they want to put on the station and stuff. And I think the program director for my last few months was Brad Phillips, because Brad was in charge of Z95, which is a tremendous success story. And part of the fun of actually working at Sea Isle was getting a chance to work next door to Z95. There was some good people there. And in fact, we knew one of them, John. We knew Clay St. Thomas,
right, who
was doing the morning show at Z. And it was good. We did some really good production pieces, a lot of good promotions and things like that. And that I was able to be on both sides from that standpoint. I didn't do a show on Z, but I certainly did a lot of commercials for them and things like that. But and then that fell apart in what was it? Probably June of 93. They decided to go another direction with the morning show, which eventually became Red Robinson. So it was the first time I think I'd been replaced by an older person, someone who'd been actually in the business
Well,
much longer than me, you know.
iconic though. I mean,
Oh yeah. And I absolutely understood the direction they were taking. The station wasn't doing spectacularly well anyway, so they wanted to have a sort of a franchise, you know, what would you call it? A headliner there.
yeah.
And I think it worked fairly well for them.
So what about the move back to Ontario for you? What?
So that we went back for family reasons. I had met my wife, my future wife, in Vancouver, and we both had family that we wanted to be closer to. So we made a decision that we would go back to Ontario. And I tried through the Chum group to find a place in Ontario, and that was not working. So, but we decided to go anyway. We left in the end of September of 2000. And they were very nice at Kiram FM. I was still doing the weekends, and they let me do my weekend shift from Toronto. So they arranged for me to go into the studios at Chum, 1330 Yonge Street, the legendary.
How long? For how long?
I did that till January of 2001. So basically, because ratings were on, I said, you know, I had suggested that, you know, because ratings are on, maybe you want some consistency, and they said, yeah, that's a good idea, and they were able to. You know, I did the morning show. I had an operator back in Vancouver, and I would go into this studio. They'd put the pod up for me and at Chum, and I would sit there for about 4 hours, I guess, and do the show. And of course, it was great because it was a 6 to noon show or 6 to 2 in Vancouver, but I didn't have to be there till like just before 9 o'clock in Toronto, and then I think after about 4 hours, then I voice tracked the rest of the show. And someone played
classy. That's pretty cool. They did
that. That was very nice of them. Well, because they showed great empathy, because I had lost my dad all of a sudden 3 weeks after getting to Toronto. My dad died suddenly, and so they thought. Well, I guess they thought, well, you know, this guy's got enough problems, and I wanted to stay on the air because that helped me go through the grief, and. They were kind enough to let me do it till the end of the year. And eventually they said, how long do you think you're going to be, you know, doing this? And I said, well, I'm looking for work in another market. And I think I might have something. So, and eventually, but I think I did the second weekend of January, and that was my last shift of 2001, because I started in Kitchener about a week later.
So going back home, and I'm always interested in this because I hear from a lot of broadcasters when they're living in a situation where, you know, obviously real estate's expensive, and they go, I'm going back east to New Brunswick. Like some of my colleagues, where they can buy a house for, but there's that other thing they always remind me of. So it's not just the advantageous real estate. It's also the fact that I go there and I'm home again. How did it feel for you? I know you lost your dad, unfortunately, but.
Yeah, well, we stayed with my mom for a few months. This was in Toronto, but I had gotten the job in Kitchener for January 2001. So I was commuting from Toronto to Kitchener, which is not that bad. It's about, I think for door to door, it was 90 kilometers or something, mostly on the 401 highway. And the only time it would get a little dicey would be in the wintertime. But we did that for 6 months, and then we found a place in Kitchener. And it's funny you mentioned the real estate thing, because going from Vancouver to buying a house in Kitchener was unbelievable. I thought, I kept reading, seeing the real estate ads in Kitchener. I thought, well, that's a typo. That can't be that low. So we would see a house that I know my wife had a friend in Vancouver who paid like $435,000. And this is in the year 2000. And we found a house in Kitchener that was similar, and it was like 135. And I said to my wife, Anne, I said, you know, that's like your friend's house in Vancouver that was like 3 times as much. And she couldn't even live in the basement because she had to have a tenant. You know what I mean? And we got the full use of the house, kind of thing. Anyway, we moved in there, and but so then we were based in Kitchener. My wife had got a transfer to a Kitchener office, and so we spent almost 15 years. Yeah, 15 years in Kitchener for sure. Yeah. So I worked for Rogers for Chime FM, which when I got there was again in light rock, less talk kind of format. Favorites of yesterday and today, whatever you want to call it. Where's my mug? Here it is.
Show me a mug.
FM. This is what you have in radio after you worked a long time. You don't have a pension. You have mugs and hats and T-shirts.
And name tags over there by the clock. All the tags like C-Fun, QM.
Yeah, yeah. And so I did afternoons on Chime, and at the time, Chime was like a local legendary station. I mean, it was we had about a 22 share of the market. So
what?
Yeah,
that's like Dave Milne. That's like Dave Milne's midday show there in Vancouver.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, who was working there when you got there?
Well, we had the program director was Gavin Tucker, who had just been promoted to general manager, and then we had a famous morning guy for Kitchener. His name is George Michaels. Great guy. He retired just before I left the station, but he got to choose when he left. And so but he had been in mornings, I think, since 1984. Yeah. So, and that's initially how I applied to this radio station. They had an opening. This is in the spring of 2000, and we knew we wanted to make our way back to Ontario. So I was looking for these opportunities, and I sent this tape and resume to Kitchener, and because they said they wanted a morning show co-host.
Right.
So I sent it off, and then eventually I get a call back saying, well, I got to be honest with you, we have a great morning guy, but we need a co-host for him, and it's probably going to be a woman, because that's what it was before. And he says, but tell me why you're interested in coming back to Ontario from Vancouver. And anyway, we just sort of kept up a relationship and kept in contact. And he says, I don't have anything for you now, but if you ever make your way back to Ontario, make sure you drop in and we'll get together. And that's how that came about. And then he was ready to hire me by January 2001. So I did afternoons for quite a while. And it's a great station, very high profile station that did a lot of good charity work, a lot of, presenting this and that, a lot of remotes and stuff. So there wasn't any, there wasn't any hope of me. I wasn't aspiring to be a morning guy, because I knew that we had a really solid morning show host in George. So it was just great. I got to fill in for him, of course, when he went on holidays. So that was great. They actually ended up hired a woman from Calgary who was a wonderful woman. Her name is Tara Connors, and she had been at CFR in Calgary till 2000, and then she got the job in Kitchener. She's still there. She's still on that station. So. But good crew. We had some really good people there, and good management. We did really well for the company, and we made good money for them. We got a bonus, I think, a couple of different years, because they used to have those kind of programs back then, when the employees would actually share in the profits, kind of thing, a little bit anyway. So that was nice. So then they came to me, and then Rogers ended up buying a country station. There was an independent operator named Paul Larsh who had a country station in Kitchener.
That was your first go at country, right?
Yes, first on air country, yeah. And so they wanted to relaunch the station after they got approval that Rogers was going to own it. And they took me aside and said, now here's what we have in mind. Are you interested? We're going to take you off the Chime side, and we'd like you to do afternoons when we relaunch Kicks 106, it was called. And again, I mentioned earlier, 5 to 7 year term, you kind of get, a little antsy, and what am I going to do next? And I thought, well, this is a good time to do this, because I was starting to feel like I wasn't really enjoying the music on the other side as much anymore. They had started making some changes, and maybe I'll give this. And they said to me, "Do you like country music?" I said, "Yes, actually, I do. I like Trisha Yearwood. I like, Kenny Rogers. I like a lot of these performers, and I've been to country. Dwight Yoakam. I'd been to country concerts before." And they said, well, that's really good. So, because we'd like you to do the afternoons, and we're going to have to keep this hush hush for a while, because we're not going to announce our plans. And we're going to send you to the country radio seminar, the 3-day convention that's down in Nashville. And when you come back from that, you're going to relaunch, and you'll be on the station.
You'll be indoctrinated by then.
Exactly. So they sent me down with a producer. We went down to Nashville to this annual convention. And it was so eye-opening and so much fun. And we met a lot of artists, and we got to see some real big well, artists that would become big stars, like Luke Bryan and Taylor Swift and Brad Paisley and all these people. And we went to a Q&A session with Garth Brooks and, the whole thing. It was a lot of fun. And it got me, and plus there were seminars about country radio. So I met a lot of country radio people. And I got to learn about the culture of that whole world. And so I got back and we relaunched the station. I had to be in another building because they hadn't incorporated the two stations together yet in the same building. So I was out on my own in Waterloo in a building with just a producer in the next room and not a very good internet connection between the two. So it was really difficult. If I had a problem, I was really hooped. I had to phone the station and get them to fix something. And then eventually we moved into the other building. And so I did that for actually not very long. I did it for about 9 months. And then they came back to me. And the fellow who had taken over for me on the chime side was going back to where he had come from and for an opportunity there. And they came back in the room and they said, do you want to go back on the other side? Because this is what's happening. And I said, yes, I'll go back on the other side. But I always kept my hand in it with the country. So I ended up doing voice tracks for the country station at the same time I was doing the afternoon again. And then about 3 years after that, they had another plan to replace me and with someone else. And they said, again, would you like to go back on country? Because we don't want it. We don't want to lose you, but here's what we're going to do on chime because things are changing. Do you want to go back to the country station? And I said, sure. And went back and did afternoons there for a while. And then they eventually changed their moniker from Kicks 106 to this branding. Whoops. This branding here, which is they have all their stations with a similar name. That was ours. So, and I did that until they came in and restructured me in I guess it was December of 2015 or so.
What was doing those two shows like? I mean, you learn no matter what.
Yeah, I learned a lot about. Well, I knew most of the artists on the Chum on the in the C-Fun Oldies show. C-Fun. Why am I going back? The Chime Oldies show. I did the C-Fun Oldies show as well in Vancouver, but on the Chime Sunday Morning Oldies show, I knew all those artists and stuff. So it was a real pleasure for me to play that. And I put some prep into it, and eventually I started. I didn't program the show. It was just whatever was in there you played. But eventually I started programming it. So I would put in specific songs because the anniversary of that was on that day or whatever. And I try to make it a little more interesting for me and for the listener, kind of a Casey Kasem type of thing. And I did the same thing on the countryside too, but I didn't know a lot of the country stuff. And I must say, it didn't go that far back. I mean, we were kind of doing stuff from the 80s and 90s. Right. And twice an hour, I got to play something that may have been from like Patsy Cline or some from the early 60s or something. They didn't want it to be too twangy, but more, I think with Sirius XM, they call it primetime country, where they do the 80s and 90s, kind of when country became really big, right after Urban Cowboy.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the artists that, and that's the thing about country music, it's evolving, or the country radio is evolving all the time. But there are artists that were really big in the 80s and 90s, like Eddie Rabbitt and Ronnie Millsap and Trisha Yearwood. And for some reason, because the country music went the way it did in radio, it's always about today's best country. There's not a lot of room for the older artists. And there's nothing wrong with those artists. And they were all great, especially when they had their hits.
The 90s were great.
So that's kind of what we focused on in that show. Was that?
Well, the 90s country is the last segment of country that I personally like. Winona, Mavericks were big.
Yeah.
Who's the guy, the blonde guy with the long hair? He's
Alan Jackson.
Alan Jackson. I loved Alan.
Chattahoochee.
Yeah. And Brooks and
those are all great artists. And today I listen, if I'm in the car, I put on Sirius XM. I'll go to Willie's Roadhouse. Yeah. Because I do like some of the twang. I like guys like, Farron Young and all those guys from the early 60s. And of course, early Willie Nelson is great. And but the stuff from the 80s and 90s, I mean, there's some really good music there. And that's all this great songwriting. Nashville's just tremendous storytellers and songwriters.
Okay, let's talk about the albums. What albums did you pick?
Albums, so the 50th anniversary albums. Okay, well now
Or in what?
because I am a piano player
Yeah.
and I am a guitar player, and I was back in 1971. These are some of the ones that made the biggest impact on me. What a record that is! I
First
got
album I
that.
ever bought. Let me interrupt you. First album I ever bought.
Well, I got this for Christmas. I think in must have been Christmas of 71 from my mom and dad. And this is the original one. It's got the, the book in it and all that. And I do play. I could play a little bit of Levon. I could play Tiny Dancer, and that was good. Now I think this one was also the same year. Elton was so prolific. His contract was what? Do an album every 6 months. Of course, this was a live recording anyway.
Yeah.
So I have that one. Now I wouldn't call that in my top 3 for sure. But here's again, Tapestry.
Talk about with that album especially, and I know everyone's celebrating it because the anniversary is coming.
Yeah,
everyone's talking about it right now because talk about standing the test of time. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, the songs are incredible on here, and she is, of course, legendary. And maybe when I got this in 71 or 72, I didn't realize Carole King was the one who wrote so many songs in the 60s with Jerry Goffin. And I have since seen that musical. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Beautiful. It's the Broadway show of Carole King. We saw it in Toronto, and it's an incredible show because it also focuses on the other songwriters who were of that time. Was Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, the other couple who wrote, you've got that Lost That Love and Feeling and stuff. But Carole King and Jerry Goffin wrote a lot of great stuff. And of course, she wrote stuff for Tapestry and then beyond. So what a musical legend she is. And again, piano, great piano songs, right? Feel the Earth Move, It's Too Late. Those are great to play by ear. Here's a guy that I was really into back in the early 70s, Cat Stevens. So that's one of my top albums. And again, all the great songs on this: Morning is Broken, Moonshadow, Peace Train, The Wind. So those are things that I would, fool around on the guitar with and play on the piano. So those are the most important to me. Now, I know that this was Blue. Yeah. But I didn't know this album in 1971. I discovered Joni Mitchell a bit later than that, or at least got into her music after that. And then this is probably a re-release, and it came out in the 80s or whatever. I got it.
Dave, how did you react to that album? Because I get people bug me sometimes, go, well, you sure cried at a lot of albums. And I did. But when I first heard Blue, it was one of those albums that made me quite emotional because of how raw she was on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's songs like, obviously, autobiographical. Most of it's autobiographical and stuff. River, of course, you hear that a lot at Christmas time. Although I don't think that's a good Christmas song, but stations play it because it's in Canada, because it's Canadian content. Let's face it. And it mentions Christmas, but sure. But that's part of things that people go through at Christmas, especially if they're in a broken relationship. And that's certainly what she was talking about there. No, I don't listen to this very much, but I certainly know the songs on it, and it was early for her, right? She had a couple of albums before that, but certainly, it's a landmark album. The other one, of course, I have to say, from the rock world, I'm big on the singer-songwriters, because that 71 was the singer-songwriter era, wasn't it? That's when you had the Carole King and the James Taylor and the Cat Stevens and Harry Chapin and all those people. But for rock, I don't think you could have done much better than this.
Mm-hmm.
In 1971. There's not a bad song on this, and one I really like, especially, and it's you don't hear it that often, is The Song Is Over, the great Peter Townsend song, and it's just got a lot going on in it, and but it's sort of underplayed. It wasn't a hit single or anything like that, and I like that a lot. Here's an interesting one. I had probably got this. Here you go. That's Roger Dean's autograph.
Is it his autograph?
I didn't get
really?
this. What's that?
Is that his autograph?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot.
He's the cover designer, for those who don't know. I didn't have this in 71. I got this probably in the late 70s. But Yeah, I met him. He was at a blues festival in Kitchener back about 5, 6 years ago, and I heard he was going to be there signing the poster. He did the poster for the blues festival that year,
Yeah.
and I heard he was going to be there to sign the poster. I thought, well, wait a second, I got a couple of Yes albums, and I'm going to get it. So he signed them. He was very nice to do that. And of course, this is a great one from, yeah.
One of the greatest albums of all time for me.
There's a little thing on here called Stairway to Heaven, which again, as a guitarist, you got to play, right? You got to. Now, I think I heard you mention this one. I didn't realize this was a 50th anniversary, but this is Jerry Rafferty. And I do have this, but I got this on a re-release some years later. But there's a guy who actually wrote about the music business on the album. It's called Sign on the Dotted Line. And that was his sort of adventures surrendering to the business of music, right? And it's funny, that's a funny song because you know who recorded that song, as I recall, back in the 70s, was the Canadian duo, the Rays. Do you remember the Rays who did Que Sera, Sera?
TV specials on CBC.
Yeah. They actually did that. I don't know if I still have that 45, but that was, when I saw the credit on that by the Rays, I said, Jerry Rafferty wrote that, and then eventually I got this album and I see there he is. So those are some of my top picks from 50 years ago. There's lots of great albums that came out, but I didn't necessarily have. Aqualung is another one I have, but I probably got that long after 71. And
the Jackson thing. So what was that experience like? I mean, because radio does not always come with the big perks. We get free records, but we were all pretty excited about that. What was that like?
I guess that was a contest we had with some listeners, and the contest was we're going to fly them from Edmonton to Vancouver on the Saturday, and that Saturday night they were going to go to the BC Place Stadium and see the Jacksons and their victory tour. So it was my job as the radio guy to at least pay some of my way by actually phoning the radio station and doing a report. Now, in a modern radio station, you might not have anybody actually on the air live on a Saturday night anymore. So you wouldn't be doing that, or they'd find a way to, pre-record your report. But I did have to find a pay phone in the snack bar area underneath the stadium somewhere to make the phone call. Did I phone you or was it somebody else?
I remember I asked you a really stupid question. I remember it was one of those don't things. I said, out of 1 to 10, Dave, what would you say? And you're going, well, it wasn't really with that kind of experience. And then suddenly I'm going, oh yeah, that was a really stupid question. But I remember the things that stick out in your mind, but I was so nervous because I knew you were going to call. I remember that.
Yeah, it was very hard to hear on the phone actually, because it was so loud coming from the stadium and it was reverberating in this mezzanine area kind of thing. My biggest impression of the show was, to tell you the truth, there was sure a lot of people walking around during the show, which they weren't, exactly enthralled by what was going on. They seemed to have a lot of time to walk around. So I didn't think, but it was a big show. And it was the first time, I guess, I saw an artist use the big video screens to either side of the stage. So you found your eyes were drawn to the screen more than the actual thing on stage, which you see all the time now, right? So,
what was your favorite radio gig?
Oh, probably CFUN. The fact that I got to go to CFUN and work for Chum for a total of probably 12, 13 years. That was a big highlight. I got to meet, members of the Waters family and work with some pretty good and pretty stable management. I mean, there was no changes in all the time I was there, so.
What was the biggest learning curve for you personally? A guy gets a job. There's always something. I mean, I didn't know how to edit tape when I got to K-Lite. What was your biggest learning curve when you were in any job in radio?
I think the first job I had is just going on the air and trying to keep it together and pushing the right buttons. I know I had a steep learning curve when I went to Sea Isle when they had me doing the morning show, and they basically I didn't have a producer. I don't even think I had a producer from day one, and I told you earlier about all the configurations they had. They had some stuff on DAT, they had CDs, they had stuff that was on the RCS at the time, and DCS, I think it was called, a digital system. And what it was another, so, and then, oh yes, and record on a reel-to-reel some callers making requests. So, get all this together and do it. That was probably the toughest I ever had to work in a control room, was that gig, which was, mercifully 14 months, but it was a tough to do. Yeah.
But what moment, Dave, was it for you in radio when you thought, yeah, I got this.
Yeah, probably getting a chance to do the morning show at CKRA in Edmonton, and and having a lot of support from the people who, because I think there was a period where we went between two morning guys. It was a waiting period for the next guy, and they put me on there like for a week or two, and I had only been in the business for like about a year, if that. So that was a tremendous confidence builder. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, I must be doing something right here.
What's the first album you ever bought?
I don't know about the first album I ever bought, but I certainly remember, aside from children's albums and stuff that I got when I was a kid, the first album that my parents bought me was Twist and Shout by the Beatles in July of '64, when I had my birthday. So
what broadcasting habit drives you crazy?
We kind of make fun of it. Some other friends and I will make fun of the time thing, when especially when you're doing a morning show and it's 7:50, 10 minutes to 8 o'clock. It's 7:45, quarter to 8. But there's other little radioisms, and I've always tried to stay away from some of those crutches and stuff. But when you get into a morning show thing and you kind of hear everybody doing that time thing, that's definitely sticks out. But the one thing I'm proud of on the air is I have never been on the air on a Wednesday and said, hey, it's hump day. Because I forget where I first heard it, but I remember for years going, what the hell does that mean? And then somebody explained it to me. It's because you're on Monday to Friday and Wednesday is the middle of the work week. So we're just past the hump, everybody. And the reason I sort of vowed to never say it is because I couldn't pull it off, first of all. And a lot of my radio life, I didn't work Monday to Friday. I worked Wednesday to Sunday or some other thing. I thought, I don't get this. Hey, the weekend's here. And that was the other thing. The weekend is upon us. And then again, you put yourself in a situation, well, I work on the weekend, so what's that a big deal? You have to relate to the audience above your own feelings, right?
What DJ do you think influenced you the most? You can name more than one.
Well, I have some guys on Chum that I used to listen to. Roger Ashby, I think, is one of the best all-around guys. When I was listening to Chum FM back in the 70s, guys like Larry Wilson and Peter Griffin, all kind of natural sounding guys. And that's the kind of style that I gravitated towards. And that's when I started out in radio, was CKRA. It was an album rock station. We had that opportunity to be that conversational kind of thing. I just didn't have a lot of experience doing it. I was pretty green, but that's who I would emulate, guys like that. Yeah.
If you were 20 years old, you think you'd get into radio the way it is now?
Geez, I doubt it. I doubt it. I just don't see a future in it. You can't, in all good consciousness, encourage somebody to get into a business where on a daily basis you're hearing about, cost cutting and all the networking that's going on and voice tracking and stuff like that.
What's been the biggest perk for you? You think, I mean, I always look at, meeting rock stars and stuff, but what's been the biggest perk of being in radio?
I would say meeting a lot of the musicians, getting a chance to talk to them. In the early days in Edmonton, we went to a lot of concerts. We didn't have to pay to go to concerts and things. And that was always a nice perk. So I would say, yeah, generally meeting the people who make the music that you're playing would be one of the most important things.
What was the first interview you had in radio, and what was that like?
I think I mentioned Christopher Cross. I think that was one of the first solo interviews I did, where I know I once at the station, Peter Granger and I interviewed some members of the Babies. That was probably late 79 or early 80, but I wasn't on my own, but probably Christopher Cross. I remember going out to meet him and having my little portable tape machine and recording that. It was very, he made it very easy to do. And he was a very friendly guy and down to earth. So that was good.
Craziest moment you've had in radio?
Yeah, I remember there was a funny period there where I came back to CFUN after leaving Sea Isle, and I was doing weekends and fill-in and stuff. And Stu was really big on getting out into the community. It was the summertime of probably 1993 or something. And he had me going out on the weekend to do the show on location, not a commercial remote, just on location. And one of the weird ones was down in Crescent Beach, sitting on the beach. And, we must have had a truck or something nearby, and we had power to send the signal back to the station. But I remember doing the weekend Saturday morning show from Crescent Beach. And there were a couple of other places like that. I remember doing we went and did on location at the Abbotsford Air Show. And I was in a van once, and I had to do an interview with Jan Arden, and I was in a van coming from the Abbotsford Air Show, had to stop somewhere on the road and take this call from Jan Arden. I said, I'm in a van in Abbotsford, and you're in Lloydminster on the road somewhere. And it was just this great, I thought that's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed that. One of my radio heroes, Dave Welch. I'm honored to be able to call him a friend. Funny, fast, entertaining. The guy could do anything. And he used to entertain at the 14C Fun QMFM Christmas party. Him and Stu Ferguson, another one of my heroes. It was Stu that hired me at 14C Fun in Vancouver. And they do these shows at our Christmas parties. It was hilarious. And I'm hoping to get Stu on here as well, because Stu made a big difference in my life. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Canada. Take care of yourself.